Hey guys, been wanting to record a video for a little bit to kind of go over what Stint Analyzer is and some of the things that changed since the very first video. Most of it's basically still the same, but screens look a little different, so just kind of wanted to go over a brief overview of some of the features and maybe there's something hidden that you haven't ever seen before and didn't know it would do it. Probably not going to go over some of the more advanced functions like the Discord setup and Google Sheets setup, things like that in this video. There's always the other videos for that. Uh, but this will kind of just be a newer, refreshed version of the very first original Stint Analyzer video and hopefully cover all the features that we currently have. Um, So the first thing you'll notice is I have AI running in the background making laps, and you'll notice some of these numbers are changing as they're making laps. Um, so what Stint Analyzer does, here as you're making laps, it records each one of your laps. You'll see your lap times, and it averages out your lap times. Um, so I call these buckets. These averages here are considered buckets. You can have up to 15 buckets. Um, you may not need all of them, and there's ways to make those disappear too if you don't want that many buckets. So you'll notice that your stint is in green, so that's my current stint that I have in a practice session. Um, you'll notice that I also have an option where you can turn on other drivers' current stints. This guy right here will probably update to this pink color in just a second. There it goes. And so that allows you, if you're in a practice session with your teammates or somebody else, you can quickly look up there and say, oh, Chris Page here is on lap 13 of his current stint. Or you can kind of helps you visualize it more. One other feature I'll mention is while you're in a race, I think you almost need to have this one selected. Show only the current stints for the drivers. Basically, it'll look like this during a race. It'll condense everything down. It'll only show one stint per person, and that'll be their newest stint in the race. So I recommend always having this show only current stints during a race session clicked. Since this is a practice session, that don't take effect. But if you'd rather only see that one, you can click it, and that'll just show you the current stints. If you only want to see your stints, you can click that. You can also click it this way and only see your stints. It just kind of cleans up some of the clutter. Also dark mode, that's very important. Make sure there's a light mode and there's a dark mode. It's a little easier on the eyes than dark mode, I guess. So make sure you set that. Joking, it's your preference, whatever you want. Um, so we're going to select this. I want to show you some of the things in Stint Analyzer configuration. You'll notice that these are the buckets I was talking about. That's your averages. You'll notice I got 3, 5, 7. This is kind of comes as the default. If you don't want a bucket to show up, just put 0 in it. Maybe you only want to show 6 buckets. Put 0 in the rest of them. This running lap average is your last X number of laps. So if you put 10 in and you're on lap 40, it'll just show your last 10 lap average. I don't use that, so I make it 0. Over here is the things that you want to display on the grid. You can hide these columns. Let's say you don't want to see position, class, or car number. Show I rating, the I rating, session type, last lap time. Any of these that you don't want to show, just unclick them. So let's just say I want to see the I rating, which this is an AI race, so everybody's 0. It added that column to our screen.
Pit road speed is 35 miles per hour.
Had something on in the background there. Um, so you can take anything you want, or not anything, but most of the stuff you can kind of customize to what you want to see. This minimum number of laps to display, um, if you set it to like 3, for example, they have to run at least 3 laps before they'll show up. Um, it's kind of confusing when you're when you start a session. You just turn a lap and nobody and the lap time doesn't display on Stint Analyzer. And then you remember, oh yeah, I had that set to 3. So just kind of keep that in mind if you do set it that way. Uh, Sometimes that you got these guys that are just turning one or two hot laps, then they park it and
Pit
turn
road
one or
speed
two
is 35 miles per
park
hour.
one or two more laps. They will anyway, it just clutters it up when they're just doing qualifying laps over and over and over again. So you may want to set that to a number, whatever your first bucket is, or something like that. During race, when the session changes over to a race session, these options come into play. You can show the gap to the leader. You can show the gap to the driver ahead of you. This will also automatically sort um, by position, show their last pit stop, and whether or not you want to count their caution laps. Um, so caution laps, of course, kind of skews all the averages. So some people like to leave it off. Some of them, sometimes I just leave it on. It's just whatever your preference is. So that kind of goes over all the configuration options for the grid. Oh, one last thing I did want to mention. So this is the highlight driver's current stint. That will be the one that's in the pinkish orangish line here. If you don't want to highlight their current stint, you can uncheck that. It comes off as default. Also show lap times in minutes. Um, so that changes the format a little bit to like 1 minute 16 seconds 7:38. So it depends. Road guys want to see it in minutes usually, and oval guys want to see it in seconds. So the default's seconds because that's what the lap time comes in as. So if you want to change that, you can. Now I wanted to go over the export options. Um, this auto export, when a session changes from like practice to qualifying to race, or just anytime, it don't even have to change. Whenever you close out of Stint Analyzer or join just another test session or whatever, this will automatically export the data to a JSON file in the Documents folder. Um, it'll actually be called .stint now. It used to be called .json, but now it's called .stint. And what that'll do is that allows you to share that data with someone else. Uh, Offline test sessions, for example, don't have a session ID number, so I can't really save them because they're always 0. There's nothing unique about an offline test session that I can save. So um, what I do is on the auto export, I just have everything auto export. That way I have a backup of it no matter what. It'll save a file out to your documents folder, and you can open it back up and bring it back into Stint Analyzer. You could share it with a teammate or any of those kind of things. A couple new options we put in recently is saving a setup. I'll put a link in here about where to see the video for that because I don't want to duplicate all the effort here. But there is a soft copy and a hard copy of the setup. And also you can export your data into a Excel file, spreadsheet, or a CSV file. But this is when you export it to a Excel, you can open the folder right after it creates it so you can find it quicker. And this is the title it'll be on the spreadsheet. Miscellaneous options. Just things I couldn't figure out exactly where it needed to go. Uh, the first one is graph options, show lap times every X number of laps. if you go to the graph function and you have it set for every one lap, and you have a lot of stints that you're comparing on the graph, it kind of gets really busy with all the numbers displaying, and you can this will allow you to spread it out a little bit more. The overlay options, the show tire overlay for 45 seconds. Um, After you pit and come, if you're using the overlays after you pit, it'll say how long to leave the tire overlay up. 45 seconds seems long enough, but you can change that uh, to a lower number, higher number, whatever you need. Override region was to try to help people that are using commas in their number formats and trying to help them uh, convert back to a decimal if they need to. Or let's say you have a teammate that's in another country that uses comma and you're using periods, but the whole team wants to standardize on one or the other. That was to allow them to override to the correct format. On the When you're comparing tire usage, there's a vertical and what I call a vertical and horizontal format. This will allow you just to default it to the vertical because most people like the vertical one better, but I came out with a horizontal one first, so I'm trying to keep that option available. Um, this was the user interface. Use the classic UI is kind of makes this more a Windows application. Some people had some trouble with it, but hopefully you don't. The web interface, again, there's a video on that. If you see this YouTube icon here, there's always a video on that. And enable debug and enable trace mode, that's just if you're having trouble, you can enable those and it gives you extra information, puts some of it out to a file, shows some of it out to a screen, and you can help me figure out what the problem might be in some situations. Sound options. This allows you to change where you want your sound to go. Um, Also, do you want it to speak a new stance? So it'll say starting a new run if you have this clicked. Uh, if you have this one clicked, it'll say 5 lap average or something like that. It'll actually speak the lap time average. And these last two is where it'll just play a sound instead of speaking. So if you have speaking, that overrides the playing a sound. So you can always test your sound by clicking here.
We're using Stint Analyzer.
And always remember to save your stuff. It'll tell you that, hey, you changed something and forgot to save it. Overlays, the show wind indicator. That's a new one on the race overlay, or recently anyway. You can flip it. I had the arrow pointing one way. A lot of people said, I don't like that arrow pointing that way, so they wanted me to flip the arrow the other way. So I think the option is with it off, maybe. But anyway, you can flip the which way the arrow is pointing on the wind overlay. An off-track indicator is if you're using the race overlay, it'll turn red if you touch the grass or something like that to kind of give you, or if you're if the off-track indication comes up, it'll turn red to kind of let you know that hey, you're off track. Sometimes iRacing will count the off track, sometimes they won't. Uh, there's a couple of second delay, or I don't even know if it's a second, but milliseconds probably delay before it actually gives you a 1x for an off track. But the indicator comes on, but somehow they time it for, you have to be off track for like a full second or something like that. So I don't know what the full, how many seconds it has to be. So that's the main thing on the configurations. Again, the export, there's a video on this. Click here. There's a video on the setups. You can click there for the video for that. Same thing with the web interface. And I believe that's it for those. Don't forget to save it. And so we're back to using seconds here. Okay, so now let's get into some of the options across the top here. Just see that let's say we want to compare these two stints that are, let's see if I can find two that are closer together. Uh, so we got two that are 22 laps here. So I'm going to compare mine and David's stints side by side here. And you'll notice he has a bad, what AI, when they pit, they just set in the pits, so that's a big lap time, so it's not going to look very good. I hit 3 here. Okay, so this basically gives you a side by side. It shows you that, one driver versus the other driver, and you'll see that you can compare lap per lap, who's faster. It gives you a total at the bottom. So like I said, he had this one lap where he just sat in the pits for that long. But so you can see right here though, I had the AI set pretty low, so this is not a great comparison. But you can see that I was 21 seconds faster than him over 20 laps, so 21 laps or so. Um, so you can come down here and see what the difference is for each lap and what the total time difference is. And then at the very bottom is the total time altogether. Um, that'll only let you compare two stints with each other. Um, here we're going to do let's see if I can find something that's a little cleaner. Here's two. So we can compare multiple. I want to say it's unlimited, but it's probably not going to look good if you clicked every one of these. But you can graph each one of these stints. You'll see me having to drag things in and out here. So you'll see that you can zoom in on these to see that these there's a legend over here showing each one of the stints, and you can zoom in for certain laps. You can use your mouse wheel to roll in and out. Let's just say you want to compare 4 to 10 here, and that zooms it in a little bit, and it'll show you the lap time. Remember before we had the lap times on showing up for every 5 laps. There's a couple options down here at the bottom. You can do by total time, you can do by running average, and you can do by fastest to slowest. So there's a couple of different ways that you can change each one of these. You can toggle whether you want to see the lap times or not. So it makes it a little easier to read maybe. And you can hit the reset button here and it'll turn it back to the original format. Compare the tire comparison is probably not going to be real great, but you can compare. You can do multiple stints to show the tire comparisons. So earlier I talked about the vertical and horizontal. There's the horizontal format. Here's the vertical format. So it shows the number of laps as 8. This is what my tire temps were and wear versus tire temps and wear on versus 22 laps. So that's about all you can do on here. It'll tell you to show you your tire temps and wear and your number of laps for that stint. So you can compare to see. I made a change to my setup. Let's see if the tire wear is the same or worse or better. So then there's the setup comparison tool. So you'll notice here that this is just a stock setup that I changed the air pressure on. So notice I went from 15 to 14, 16 to 15, whatever, from one stint to the other. And it shows you the difference in red from one stint to the other. You can only compare 2 setups to each other. Of course, you can only see your setup, so just keep that in mind. And then we have this will export it into Excel or CSV, either one. You can select either one of those. You can say save as Excel. I'm going to do that. So it brings up my window over here. See if I can start up Excel. And that's the data that got exported. So there's one stint, there's two stints. You can also do it as CSV as well. This run sheet is what it generated timing workbook, I guess is what it's called. Again, it's just a little different format. It shows you your buckets that you have here and just the tire information, uh, pressures, and then at the very bottom, each lap time. So if you're doing comparison for one setup to the other, this could come in useful because it's in a format that you can kind of see them side by side all the way down and see what the differences are. This one is only available in Excel, by the way, so but you can open an Excel document in Google Sheets, so just want you to know, be familiar, know about that. Um, this one is an optimal time, generating an optimal time for a stint. And what that'll do is take all the laps in these two stints that I just selected and come up with an optimal time. Um, so let's say somebody pulled out in front of you, messed up one of your laps. You could combine these two, and this will say, all right, if you ran perfect laps every time, this is what your stint would look like. Of course, there on most of the screens, there's a take a snapshot that pops up. Um, that will take a screenshot, basically inside everything inside this area here, and they'll allow you to upload it to Discord or send it as an email or however your team shares information. Session events, um, that's kind of handy. Bring it down here. Every time you start a new stint, or let's say you're in your car's in an accident, for example, you can double click on this. Like I said, I have AI running in the background. Let's see if I can fast forward it here and get everything on the screen at one time. And so you'll see that this is when Brian pitted here. This is when David pitted. So every time a flag changes or an incident happens, a new stint will be popped out, or a new session event will be popped out there. So I think it's between when the caution comes out, when the green flag flies, when someone pits, or if you're in an accident, one of these session events will happen. And it just allows you to fast forward the replay to that person. So it comes in kind of handy, especially after a race. You want to go look at the wreck that you were in. You can always look at come in here to the session events and jump down here to where it happened at. So. Spotter mode is another kind of neat feature. I don't know if I can get this all on here or not. Let's see. So we got David here running. Let's see if Brian's running currently. So Brian's running. So when you have spotter mode, this icon right here turns to green. That means spotter mode is enabled. And then I double click on that person and I'll jump to them in the current part of the replay. So if they're in the pits, wherever, it'll jump to them. So if you're in a race session, for example, and you're spotting for somebody and you want to have Stint Analyzer running and you want to jump to see who's where, um, it's always going to jump to him, to the live view of that car. So even though we've got multiple stints here, it's always going to jump to that car. So to disable spotter mode, just click it again. It'll turn black, and that takes you back out of spotter mode. And then of course we got you can remove a stint by clicking on one of them, clicking remove. I think that it should ask you, are you sure you want to do that? If you hit the clear button, this says, all right, erase all this data. I want to start over. Um, quickly into the, if you double click on a stint, uh, this tire data here, there's lap. If you double click on it, you can see each individual lap, the average lap time, the temperature as it's changing, the wind directions. Notice the wind directions changing, the speed's changing. Uh, all this stuff, your steering angles, um, min max speed, and so if you double click on the stint, you can basically see all this. You can always copy this data if you highlight it and then do a Control C and then paste it back into an Excel spreadsheet if you want to. Uh, Again, you can export it too, but if that's something you want to do, you can. Uh, the tire data shows you what your tire wear and temps were at the end of a run. Um, the iRacing doesn't provide the hot pressures, but let's say you wanted to calculate, what the pressure build was uh, between each, in that run. If you go to your garage screen, you can go look at that and whoops, and punch those numbers in, and that'll show you your tire wear, and it also changes some of this cross temp averages and things like that. So um, that helps you when building the setup, so you can see if you're tight or loose or what the problems might be. Then we have the performance tab. Not much really on here, but it just shows you minimum and maximum RPM, speed, oil temp, water temp, and fuel used and fuel left. We also have notes. Let's say you wanted to add notes to this stint and say, okay, this was with me trying to run 2 pounds extra tire pressure in all the tires or something like that. You can always punch that in. And let's see. And the last thing I'm going to kind of go over is the overlays. Um, so you can see that um, overlays you don't necessarily have to have it in iRacing and Windows mode if you have more than one, more than 3 monitors or something. If you wanted to have it on the fourth monitor, you could drag this up there to the fourth monitor. I'll show you that in a second. But and I want to show you this. Um, so these are the overlays. There's one that shows you your tires after you pit, and that's the one that shows up for 45 seconds unless you change that number. This one stays up the whole time. This is the wind indicator I was talking about. You can flip that arrow one way or the other, whichever way makes sense, but that's showing that the wind's blowing against my car at 7 miles an hour. Let me kind of show what it looks like inside. So this is it inside of how I have it set up inside my car. Um, the number of laps for this stint that you have, what lap was the best lap of this stint, uh, what lap you last pitted, laps until your fuel's out. Next pit stop will be at whatever lap, and stops left, how many stops you got left in this race, and when is the last pit stop, like when will you be in your window, and the amount of fuel you need to add at that last pit stop. I am a little conservative on fuel because I don't want anybody running out. So it's probably going to give you, tell you you need about another lap's worth of fuel. So there's other fuel calculators out there that may be more on the money, but I try to be conservative when I'm calculating fuel. This just shows you how much is in your tank, and this will show you how much you're using, as you're turning laps. This is the incidents, the number of incidents, number of cautions, and number of caution laps. Of course, the air and track temp, strength of field, and again, the wind indicator. Tires are pretty much self-explanatory. And stint lap comparison. well, let's show you that for a minute. Um, so what you can do is you can right click on a stint and say compare stint and set compare stint. Now, as I'm turning laps, if I can turn laps here, it's gonna show,
Outside. You're on the bottom,
it'll
3 wide. Outside, 2
show
wide.
how
Clear
much
outside if you want it.
difference I
Outside.
am between
Outside, clear.
that stint that I just marked as the compare stint versus the current stint that I'm running. I'll have to turn 2 laps here to kind of show
Outside.
it
Still there.
as I hit an AI car.
Stay low. You're in the middle, 3 wide. Outside, 2 wide. Outside, clear. You're in the middle, 3 wide. Keep low.
So here's our first time lapped, I believe. So you'll
Stay
see
low.
1
There
of
is a car on the
22.
high side.
I was
Stay
7
low. There is a
tenths
car on the high
slower
side.
because it's showing up in orange.
Clear outside.
Let's see if I can get a faster one. That was my comparing my first lap.
Outside.
Now it came down to 3.99, and that shows you your average lap times and your total lap times. So that kind of gives you something. Let's say you're working on a setup. You say, well, this one's pretty good. I'm going to make this change.
Outside is
I'm going
clear.
to set that as my compare stint,
3 lap average.
and that will set that as my compare stint. And then I can see if that change made sense a little faster than
Clear outside.
looking up at the Stint Analyzer screen. So, see, get this lap completed here. So it was actually slower. So it'll turn green if you're faster. So that's the lap times will turn green down here to show you your difference. If you're going faster and they're kind of an orange red color.
Tire data updated.
If they're if they're if you're slower. So all right. One quick thing I'll show you too about these overlays. So you'll notice there's a lock and unlock. Well, if you click it and now click Force Race Overlay Open, you notice I can drag it. So if it's not locked, I can drag it anywhere I want to, on and off the screens. You can also resize it by grabbing the corners a little bit. So let's say you need to try to shrink it, get it a little smaller on your screen. You can. And then once you get it kind of set, lock it. And I'll show you the reason for that. So now you notice if I click on this right here, I can actually click on what's behind it. So, but it also keeps me from, I can't move it anymore. So that kind of just locks it in place and lets you click through it, if you need to. So each one of these come defaulted as off, but if you want to show the race overlay, you click that, tire overlay and the compare overlay. So those are your options there. Also, whoops, look at there. Didn't mean to do that. If you see these ads up here, these are people that provide stuff to the community. Click on them, give them a try and see what they have to offer. There is a video about the Discord setup. You'll notice the video thing here. And so if you want to set up Discord, I recommend you watch that. What it'll do is send race status updates throughout the race, saying how your race is going when you join the session and how you qualified, things like that. See if there's anything else. Add friend. Let's say you're racing with teammates. You find them up here, right click on them, add friend. And what that does is sorts those up to the top. It'll also, when they're sending Discord messages out, it'll say what position they're in along with your messages. So, and then when you get mad at your friend, you can remove him. Add note is kind of just like the other screen. You can add a note. You can look at the driver profile. That'll take you to the iRacing website and let you see, all their information on the iRacing website. The remove stint. Let's just say you ran one lap or something and it was junk. You can right click on a stint and remove it. Compare stint we just kind of went over. You can set it, but also let's say you're tired of that one. You can also clear it. So that'll take that off, and so then you can set another one as your compare stint, and you can set it as any of these other people's compare. So you can compare any other person's stint. So hopefully, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's probably a few, like I said, there's some. Oh no, there is one other thing I do want to show. Let me kill iRacing Simulator here. Sure, we'll save it. All right. So there's a couple of options here. Open session. So I'm going to close Stint Analyzer real quick and open it back up. So there's a couple of options, which I guess I shouldn't have closed it because this is an AI race and I can't save AI. I can only export AI races. I can't save them. But every time you run a race or a hosted session that has a session ID, it's getting saved out to a database. Okay. So you'll notice that I had a Kansas race the other night, and I can go out, open it, and so that's the stints from my Kansas race. So like I said, every session that has a session ID, it does save the AI session, but since the session ID and subsession ID is 0, it'll always override it. Um, so I can go back and pull up any one of these races that I've had in the past by doing a file and open session. Okay, it defaults to a 30-day window to try to, some people race a lot more than I do. So I'll only pull out the last 30 days by default. And so you just find one that you want. If you want to delete one that you no longer want, you can just click that and click the delete button and it'll delete it. The other option is to import a session. So you'll notice I have a bunch of stints, .stint files out here, and I can go back to an older one. Let's say this one was the one I was playing with earlier, or I can go back to the one I just did, and that'll import that data right back in. The import, you can actually send this file to a teammate or whoever you want to send it to, and they can view that data and import it into their system. So that makes it kind of, handy to export and import other people's data if your teammates are sharing data with each other. The other thing is you can export this. Basically, that saves it to a stint file. So whatever's on the current screen, it'll save it. Import stints from the database. So let's say this was from that practice session I just did. And let's say I want to import one of my laps. I can import just that one stint. So here we go. It just imported the same stint again. So if you do the file import stints from database, it's going to pull that up. You select the race you want by double clicking it. And I'm going to pull in this 22 lapper and import it. And there we have we re-imported this same one here again. So that's one way that you can import data. The other one is import stints from stint file. So I got some from a couple weeks ago where I was playing around with stuff as well. So if I have a file that where I exported data, and remember I have the auto save on. Right click on it or double click on it, open it, and import that one in. So here we go. We got another 29 lapper here. So that's a couple of ways that you can bring data in. Always know though that all your sessions are saved in a database on your system. None of this is being exported out to the cloud or anything. It's all local to you, and you can always pull up your previous races that way. But if you're doing a lot of sessions and things like that, you can if you're doing a lot of testing and things, you can always go back to a previous session and pull in some laps from a previous one to compare against. Let's say you're practicing today and then you want to practice again tomorrow. You can pull in yesterday's data and import it in. So hopefully that goes over a lot of stuff that maybe you didn't know was there. Maybe you knew it was all there. Maybe it's all old information, but hopefully it'll help out in going forward. Again, if you will, appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Give it a like or thumbs up. Leave some comments. Let us know if there's anything that you think could be done better. And again, appreciate everyone's support. Thank you for the donations. And again, support these guys up here that are flashing across the screen as well. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.